Tāmihana Kātene speaks with carver and community pūoro facilitator Sam Palmer. Brought up in a Pākehā upbringing, the wood ninja Sam speaks about what first drew him to Taonga Puoro. He elaborates on his in-depth practical instrument-making wānanga that he runs, the formal tikanga of how he approaches whakairo within a modern context, and also the incorporation of other practitioners' influences within his teachings and sharing of mātauranga Māori. Whakarongo mai rā.
No mai kia hau manu e.
Nō reira tēnei mihi atuana ki a koe taku hoa.
Tēnā koe.
Nau piki mai nau haramai ki tēnei wānanga o tātou. Ka tīmata ka tika ki te karakia i tēnei āhuatanga e ngākau nui ana tāua ko ngā uro, ko ngā Taonga Puoro. Kia pene. Whakarongo rā tāne te tokorangi ki te whio rau ka tauri, ki te waiohine, ki te oro ruarangi, ki te kōkiri haimata. Whakarongo rā ki te huangunguru, ki te huangongoro, ki te ngungo toku ihu, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Nō reira kātira, tēnā koe kei taku tino hoa. Ko whakai ka haramai nei kia wānanga tahi tēnei wā. Tēnei te whanua haumanu mihi atuana nei ki te haumanu. Nō reira kei taku tino hoa. Sam, nau piki mai nau haramai ki tēnei wānanga kōrero tātou. Kia tohatoa atu ngā tini āhuatanga o inei momo mahi, o inei taonga kuima koroma ki te hunga whakarongo nei. Nō reira tēnei mihi atuana. Tuatahi rā, tēnā whakamohia mai ki te hunga whakarongo, ko wai koe?
Tēnā koe. Tuatahi, e mihi ana tēnei ki te hunga whakarongo ana, e mihi ka tika kia koe hoa, te maanga e te kaupapa nei, ko ai au, no ingarangi o ki tipuna, ko Charles Palmer te tipuna tuatahi, tai mai ki Aotearoa, ko Woodlark te waka, i tipua ki au ki Manurua, i nai nei o inoho ana mātou ko toku whānau ki raro i te maru o Pukeahu, ko Sam Palmer toku ingoa. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe. Nau mai. Tēwada. Nau mai haramai. Yeah, welcome to this kōrero, this wānanga kōrero. So the kaupapa that we're looking towards is we're having a conversation about this beautiful thing that we love, which is Taonga Puoro. And I'm really enthusiastic about the mahi that you have been doing. We've been working together for a long time and we've been on this journey together for a long time. But one thing I wanted to do is to enable te hunga whakarongo people that are able to join in with these podcasts to understand te tangata ngākau nui nei ki ene momo mahi. So, kōrero mai. How did you get started in carving? Because you are mātanga whakairo and for a long time we've been doing this mahi together and just wanted to introduce your skill set by telling your story.
Kia ora. So I guess my story starts back my teenage years. When I was 15, I went into the building industry, and I think it's important to start by saying that I consider myself to have grown up in Te Ao Pākehā my whole life really until my late 20s. So, monolingual, monocultural. Even though I was in Manurua, my education was Pākehā, my worldview was Pākehā, everything I knew was Pākehā. And so at the age of 15, I went into the building industry and pursued that up until the age of around 25, did my apprenticeship, and I moved to Wellington and I started working on these beautiful old whare in Wellington. And I got inspired to start this building company that specialised in these old whare. And so I thought to specialise in this type of mahi, I needed to be a builder, a carver, a wood turner and a joiner. And it's important to say that my whole motivation to start this company was based solely on accumulating personal wealth. And I thought if I specialise, then I'll be able to stand out and put myself in that position to charge more and essentially just get more money. I loved the mahi and I loved the work, but I wanted to be in that position to chase those dollars.
Take over the world.
Take over the world, bro. Be the next big thing, you know. And so I left building my late 20s, and the first thing I went to pursue outside of carpentry was carving. And so there was no architectural carving on offer at that time, like the acanthus leaf and corbel and all those sorts of things you might find in those old Victorian whare. My uncle handed me this little paper cutout, this little clipping, newspaper clipping, and it was an ad for whakairo Māori carving and pōoro at Whitirea. And I was a bit hesitant, like it wasn't what I was thinking about, it wasn't what I was focused on, but it was all that was on offer. And so I rang up and I talked to the tutor, Takirirangi Smith, and I approached it with all my ignorance and all my arrogance and all my misunderstandings that I had up to that date. And I said to him, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to learn carving because I have this goal.
Yeah.
And I just want to come in, learn carving and tap out, you know.
Yeah.
And at that moment, you know, a really special moment in my life, because Takirirangi, in all his wisdom, he left the door open and he said, well, you know, feel free to come along and, you know, give it a go and you might enjoy it and you might pick some other stuff up. And so that's quite important to touch on, is there was a real crossroad in my life where he left the door open for me, and he was really supportive of somebody that was quite obviously quite ignorant in their ways. And so I went there, and this is around 2009, I think. My first year there, I studied at Whitirea full-time for 2 years, fortunate enough to be able to do that. And my first year was full of a lot of challenges, a lot of hard conversations, I would have been really, really hard to be around in that first year, because I was very confident in my worldview and I was very confident to share my perspectives. And I was really, really fortunate to have a really good friend that challenged me on a lot of those perspectives in a very healthy way. Yeah. And so it never became personal. It was always just healthy challenges. And an example of that is one day he came up to me and he just, out of nowhere, he just said, who discovered New Zealand? And I said, Captain Cook. And he said, oh, man. He's just like, oh, well, that ain't your fault, man. That's schooling. That's the schooling's fault. So have you heard of kupe? And I was like, nah. And so that's how those conversations happen. And so the first year, I was introduced to a lot of things and it really opened my eyes. And then the second year is where we met. And by then I was probably a little bit more tolerable, which is probably how our friendship has managed to last, because I think in that first year a lot of people would have got sick of me pretty quickly, understandably too. And so from after that, the seed was planted in that space of all the beautiful things of Te Ao Māori that they have to offer. And I think when I first arrived, I think I was quite misguided in terms of what my motivations were, and the more time I spent in Te Ao Māori and the more conversations I had, some difficult and some just beautiful and easy and natural, the more I realised that it aligned more to my core morals and values.
Absolutely.
And after I'd finished studying there, I stayed in that space. I left Whitirea, went and started a joinery apprenticeship for 5 years. So the seed had been planted, but I'm pretty stubborn as well. So I thought I was telling myself, carry on with this building company, like stick to the path. But in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, something's going on, And so the seed had been planted and I was doing the joinery stuff, but I was still hanging out with all the good friends I'd met at Whitirea and still being involved in kaupapa and carving in my spare time. And that became more of a focus to me and more important to me than this other thing. And so I finished my apprenticeship and I gathered all those skills that I was wanting to gather. But towards the end of gathering all those things, I came to this realization that was no longer going to happen for all the right reasons. And I remember telling Dee one day, having the conversation and saying, I feel really strongly that I'm not going to pursue that anymore. And I don't think it was for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And it's a really good example of why it's so important to share your life with people help and support and want the best for you, because when I was doing building, I was a qualified carpenter and we were comfortable, and then I went and studied, and I was on student allowance, and I went on apprenticeship wages, and for years and years we were quite thin on the finances, and so we were working towards this other goal of being financially comfortable in the future. And then after years and years, I said to her, I don't think it's the right thing to do. And she just supported it 100%.
Yeah, awesome.
So that's really special. These are huge factor in what I do and how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how I kind of summarize that as an experience is when I went into that space originally with this idea, this fundamental idea that all I wanted to do was accumulate personal wealth. It was all about personal accumulation. And then in Te Ao Māori, just through these really natural, beautiful moments, I would look around and I'd see these people that were held in such high regard, with such respect in their society, in their community. And it wasn't about what they had, it wasn't about their assets and all this personal wealth and all those things. It was about how much they contributed.
Kia ora.
And I was thinking, man, that's the way, like that's how you want to do it. And so things shifted for me, and I guess that's how I'd summarize my my current outlook, is that it shifted from personal accumulation to contributing. So everything I'm doing at the moment is with this motivation, this drive to contribute. And so it's the same personality, and it's the same focus, and it's the same drive and enthusiasm, but I've just shifted from accumulating to contributing.
Yeah. Well, rawi ngā kōrero. It's quite amazing how being introduced to a really supportive environment can actually give your wairu a space to grow.
Definitely.
And I can absolutely say with absolute certainty that you're not alone in that the way in which rangatahi and kids are brought up in Aotearoa. I was exactly the same, I grew up in the Pā in Pūoro. Surrounded, all of my whānau were heavily Mormon influenced. I didn't fall in love with Te Ao Māori until my mid-20s. And by that time, ko ngarunga ngā koraua, ko ngarunga ko ia. But yeah, and one of the things that I find when you, like that first times that we met, is that there was a spark that changed.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Definitely.
Nera te mihi atu, my bro.
Always been comfortable around you, bro. Sometimes too comfortable.
Kia ka tika ki te kaupapa. Taonga Puoro. So this is something that we've shared this journey for a long time, and something that we both love. What drew you to te ao, te iere atua ngā oro? So there's so many different things you can specialise in te ao whakairo. And so what drew you to Taonga Puoro as opposed to pera ki tō kai okoa kia papata kirirangi ki te whakatū whare?
Yeah, pātai pai, bro. If I'm being really honest, it's not always the easiest to describe, because I've heard so many beautiful answers to that question from so many friends, and some of them have really quite almost like divine intervention experiences, but mine isn't as such. So my passion and what really drives and motivates me is bigger projects, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved in a couple of them with waka and whare and things, and that's what really motivates me. But the reality is that when in those years when I'd left Whitire and I was doing the joinery stuff, is that we had a house that I was working on, that I was renovating. We had a young family and I was working full time, and I didn't really have time for those bigger projects. So what I did is the small amount of spare time I did have, I used to make pūoro, because they're on the smaller scale of things. And so whilst I only had small pockets of time, over a long period of time I had many of them. So that built my experience in that space. And so it was through practicality of time to a degree. The seed was planted for pūoro originally at Whitireia when Warren Walbrook came into the Taonga Puoro wānanga with us.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
he came with his English red coat on and the steez of the man.
Yeah, man. And so that was a really special turning point for me at that wānanga at Whitireia, and my eyes were open to the world of Taonga Puoro. And so there were sounds and feelings in that wānanga that I hadn't felt and heard before, and so that stayed with me. And then I guess if you have small amounts of time and you can do small projects, you can also do other things like maurako and those things, but pūoro seemed to be calling me in some way that I don't have words for. But my experience grew over time in that space, and then people would ask if I could contribute in certain ways, and then those experiences grew in contributing. Yeah. So that's kind of been my journey in it.
Yeah, awesome.
In the making.
I refer to you whenever I talk to anybody about my bro Sam, I talk about the wood ninja. So anything in the shaping of wood, this fella's your man.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I really appreciate in my own journey in whakairo and being a maker is the techniques that I've learned from you, like the wood turning. It's completely changed the way I approach the crafting of certain things. And one of the things that sticks very heavily in my own whakairo is when I first started, back when we first met, I was stuck in this mindset that I needed to use hand tools.
Oh, yeah.
I was stuck in this, if you used an angle grinder on something, you were cheating. You weren't doing it justice.
Definitely.
And I had a kōrero with my koro about using chainsaws and machinery and whatnot. And my koro's response was, he says to me, "Boy, do you think our tupuna was so stupid they wouldn't have used a better tool if they had it?"
Definitely.
That was like really eye-opening for me, to take away that this, because it was almost like a little bit of arrogance that, I have to do this. I have to struggle through this process. What are your thoughts on adopting the techniques of other makers and other cultures and incorporating them in your practice?
Yeah, well, to start by touching on that, in my first year before we had met, I had the exact same perspective, and I did some things that were painfully slow and unnecessary, and I grew out of that pretty quickly because one of the kind of rules of thumb or a question that is frequently asked in woodworking in general is, what is the quickest and most accurate way to achieve what you want to achieve? And so you have speed and accuracy, and there are times when a hand tool is the top of speed and accuracy. And so for myself, I really enjoy using a hand plane to shape the outside of pūtorino, because I'm able to hold the pūtorino with one hand, turn it, and use the plane to remove large cuts. Yeah. And so there's speed and accuracy in that. But then there's the grinder has speed and accuracy in it too, but it gets to a point when the accuracy starts to thin out and it just is only fast, and so you change to another tool. So there is no one tool for all jobs. It's a matter of asking yourself the question, what is the quickest and most accurate? And for a lot of surface patterning and a lot of fine detail work, there's still nothing as accurate as hand tools, as chisels.
Yeah, absolutely.
If something happened tomorrow, if something was invented that created the same accuracy as a hand chisel to do pattern work, I think a lot of people would shift tomorrow. But at the moment, that's where the accuracy stands. It may not be fast, but it is accurate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just thinking while you were having your poka kōrero about was the toki. And that's one of the things that I've seen in recent years. I've actually started focusing on trying to use them more. There's almost people are not really keen to try because they are quite difficult to get that speed and accuracy that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've learned over trying to use them is that your body has to be ready to use it. And then that's where the difference between picking up an angle grinder, flicking the switch.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a strong wrist really to use it.
Yeah.
But with a toki, it's super fast and super accurate, but only if you've been using it for like 6 months.
Yeah, if you got the stamina, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you got the right toki in your hand, then you can work for more than 5 minutes at a time.
Definitely.
Let's move on to the making, since we started talking about the process and the tooling and the philosophy of drawing other techniques from other places into our practices of creating Taonga Puoro. Throughout our journey, there have been many occasions where, like I know when I first started to use the wood lathe, it was, we're parked up in that little concrete garage of yours, and you're making bags and bags of wood chips. One of the things I really enjoyed about that was the ability to make lots and lots of kōwau.
Yeah.
If I was doing that using hand tools or any other tool really, other than the lathe, there's no way we would have get 50 kōwau to koha to a kura.
Definitely.
So in your process, I've seen in your practice, I've seen a lot of times where a lot of the massive numbers of kōwau, kuko porotiti, that you koha and that you give out to the communities. I was just wanting to talk about that process and how that feels in terms of trying to distribute Taonga Puoro that can be played basically with as little effort as possible.
Yeah.
So we've done a few kaupapa together where, we stand there and we take people through the process of finishing kōwau, starting them on their journey and playing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something a lot of people who see you out in the hapori out in the community in Wellington see you doing. But I just want to get a deeper understanding of, it takes love to do that. And what is it that drives you to push, like moving towards that focus on contributing to the, that you were talking about earlier?
I think my fundamental motivation for everything I do, is, as you're saying, is in contributing. And so for myself, when I navigate some big things, some big topics, some big moments, what I try and do is simplify them. And so it would be quite easy to talk quite in depth about what motivates me and what drives me to do that. But really, naturally, what I do is I simplify things. And so if I can simplify it down to this basic concept that I'm just motivated to contribute, then that's what does it. And so there can be times where it is physically and mentally challenging to do large amounts of things, and you can really hit the wall and you need to push through it. And you just need to have your motivator and your why.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it's just to contribute, really, is to make it accessible, to people. And I think when we know the whakapapa of Taonga Puoro from pre-European to today, we know that the accessibility has gotten to a point where at some stages in that whakapapa, the accessibility was a big issue. And so for me, maybe the way I can contribute to the kaupapa as a whole is to contribute with the accessibility of it. And then other people contribute to the kaupapa in other ways once people have it in their hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my motivator. Make it accessible, contribute to making Taonga Puoro accessible, and just keep it simple.
Yeah, awesome. Talking about contributing, so over the last few years now, so you've been running Taonga Puoro making wānanga here in Te Upoko Te Ika. It's an amazing kaupapa, tēnei mihi atu ana, because there are very few things. My heart is in wānanga. That's where my happy place is, and that's where I think our kaupapa thrive, is in wānanga.
Tautoko, man.
So just give us a bit of an understanding on what you do in terms of the wānanga that you run.
So those making wānanga, the first one was late 2018, and I really need to start by saying that Dee is a huge support in those wānanga.
Kia ora.
And so she does a lot in the preparation leading up to it. There's a lot of admin that I didn't realise. I thought you just turn up on the day and you just start a wānanga, but there's a lot of communicating and a lot of admin that goes into making sure the start of it runs smooth and people turn up and they know where to go. And so what we started with is essentially the fundamentals of carving, how to shape wood with a chisel, basically. And we did that within the Taonga Puoro space of kōwau, porotiti, pūrerihua, nguru and pūtorino. And so I started by loosely preparing the wood for the people and having all the tools ready, and we'd start with a kōrero about the basics of carving, and then they would just spend the weekend in their own way making their taonga. And I think the fundamental kōrero at the start is really important to set everybody up and to reassure them that they are capable and they have the ability to do it. the other thing that's really important is that I really encourage everyone to have their own style, and I have my style, and I would never expect anyone to have to follow what I do. And so those are really the beautiful moments in that space, in that wānanga space, is seeing people going through that really personal journey of who they are and what they naturally gravitate towards and lean to, and you know, their personalities, and they're experiencing that, and they're finding it out for the first time, some of them, and I get to share that moment with them.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's always just about being really supportive and really reassuring that they're doing an amazing job. And so in those wānanga, we make pūoro, but we also, it's full of a lot of personal journeys for people, and there's been a lot of amazing stories shared with me and Dee after the wānanga in those little spaces where we can kōrero privately. That's been a big motivator for me to keep going, because some of the stories have been really personal, and I'm just so privileged and so honoured to be able to be a part of those people's journeys.
Absolutely, because I come in and help when I can.
Yeah, thank you, my bro.
The thing I love about that is, you know, the lives you touch. So how many of them have you done now?
Lost count, but starting in 2018, I think we're up to like 14 or 15.
Oh, kātahira. One of the things I really enjoy when I come to tautoko the Wānanga Puoro is the wānanga and the discussions that we have on tikanga. The tikanga that we have, which applies specifically to the shaping of wood and the developing of the tools which release your oro. And the other is the tikanga involved with how we treat each other. That's one of the things that sticks really heavily with me is your whakairo on how we treat each other in these wānanga. So tēnā kōrero mai. Let's have a discussion about this thing we call tikanga, because it's one of those things that, you know, you can, when you bring it up, some people kind of get clammy and kind of retract into themselves because you know, they feel like they're being judged. But I think that the best way to express and the best way to develop our understanding of things is the wānanga.
Yeah,
so sure. How do you approach the formal tikanga of how we approach whakairo within a modern wānanga context?
Yeah, so I need to return to those days at Whitirea when we had time and space to wānanga in the workshop. And so I originally went into that space with no understanding of Te Ao Māori or any of the reo or anything. And so that word tikanga would be used a lot. So I would just ask the question, you know, what is it? And it would start the wānanga. And so I was offered the perspective that every tikanga has a taha wairua and a taha kiko, a practical side and a wairua side to it. And especially in whakairo, it's quite clear and easy to see that. And when we think of some of the old tikanga, so not carving at night, my friend would say to me, well, you need to close your eyes and then try and carve, because that's what carving at night was like.
Yeah, true.
And te pō was te pō. It was quite a basic tikanga, turning your carvings over at night. We are in completely different workspaces now with lockable doors and windows and corrugated iron roofs and concrete floors. But that wasn't always the space. And so with rain and moisture and birds coming in and nesting above whakairo and all of those things, you would arrive the next morning and there would be a mess on your whakairo. So there was the idea of turning it over at night. And you can probably quite easily see the taha wairua of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't always know the taha kiko. And so I also had it explained to me that tikanga can evolve and change within the environment, and the taha kiko, the practical side, has a huge part in that. And so now you'll see carvers quite commonly and naturally carving at night because we have lights.
Yeah,
that's
and the life. You know?
Yeah, and that's not even debatable. Like if you look at any of the wakahuia documentaries that are interviewing carvers, they're almost all carving at night in those documentaries.
And like in personal experience, that's the magic hour.
Oh, it is,
between midnight and 3 in the morning is when you get the work done.
Yeah. So you can see how tikanga can change quite easily when things change. And so there's some old tikanga that we have brought into the wānanga space. So collecting your chips, your wood chips, and returning them back to the whenua. That's still relevant and practical today, maybe even more so, because a lot of carvers will source their rako from maybe Trade Me or a shop or I don't know, somewhere. It just gets handed to them and they've got something.
Yeah, native timber supplies in Waikanae.
Exactly. And I think we're actually growing in our disconnect with where rako comes from and its connection to the whenua.
Kia ora.
So in that tikanga, the wānanga of just collecting it and putting it in a sack, and then at the end of the wānanga I return it to the whenua, and we have some little trees planted that we feed, little tōtara and kakatia, and for the people at the wānanga, it reconnects them to the space that what they're working with is from the whenua, and we'll go back to the whenua. So we have that tikanga. We have no food and drink in the wānanga because that's still relatable to today, and with the practical side of not having a mess. And when you have a group of sometimes strangers come together and some people are a little bit more casual than others, you wouldn't want somebody coming up to your space with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and accidentally spilling it on your mahi. So that's the taha kiko, and the taha wairua still applies to this day. And then the other one that's really big for us is the kōrero that we use in the wānanga space, kei roto, kei waho hoki, the kōrero we use with ourselves to be kind to ourselves and to others, and to be supportive of ourselves and to others, because the taha kiko of that tikanga is it's very practical, that our thoughts and our headspace directly affects how our hands work. And when we're distracted and we're being hard on ourselves and we're telling ourselves that we can't do it and we're not good enough, it's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
And we make mistakes, and then we're too hard on ourselves with those mistakes. And so the wānanga space is built on those tikanga, and it's so important that we support ourselves and others around us, because it has a flow-on effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just for, making mistakes in what you're doing, but, if you're not in the right mindset, using sharp tools is dangerous.
Exactly.
And, and then I know that I've got the scars to prove.
We all do.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of the wānanga, one thing that I wanted to get your opinion on is the whole topic of how to navigate te ao Māori as a tangata Pākehā, and how the space affects the things that we do, and especially for someone in your position who there's an absolute love for te ao Māori. Which is probably one of the reasons we're homies, is because I see that spark in you, and that you're teaching mātauranga Māori through that love to tawira from everywhere. Māori mai, Pākehā mai, Indiana mai, koe atu, koe atu. How do you approach this topic? I mean, what are your thoughts on navigating mātauranga Māori spaces through he whakapapaririki?
Yeah, well, pātai paima, bro. Recently I've kind of been trying to navigate this idea based around this metaphor about te ao Māori being like a whare. And so I'll try my best to articulate it. But as a Pākehā, every time I visit this whare, I know that I'm a guest in this whare, and this is the fundamentals of everything I do.
Kia ora.
And I will always be a guest in this whare. And no matter how much I contribute, and no matter how many times I'm invited back, and no matter how much people enjoy me being in this whare as a guest, I know that I'm a guest. And so I'm not trying to work my way up to being considered Māori. I know I'm Pākehā, I know my whakapapa, and I'm proud to be Pākehā. And I think Pākehā, as a dictionary definition, yes, is a noun, but I see Pākehā as a verb. And so when people say, Pākehā, they're saying that as a verb. They're saying, that Pākehā's coming in with their own intentions and their own motivations. And you can hear it in the tones. And that's because Pākehā are creating their own definition through their actions of what Pākehā is. And so what I'm trying my best to do is to acknowledge that I'm a guest in this whare and to be the best guest I can be. Come with a koha. Don't overstay your welcome. Know that in this whare, at any point, just like our whare and our houses, if you could be invited around and you might hear, you know, this is a big whare with a lot of people in this whare. The people that invite you around are very welcoming and very friendly, but maybe in the background you can hear some people saying, you know, what are they doing here? You know, like this is our whare. Like, you know, they're always coming around here eating our biscuits and drinking our cup of tea, and they don't bring nothing with them and blah, blah, blah. And so I really understand why people have those complaints. It's because we're in their whare. And so, yeah, that's kind of my basic kind of fundamental idea of how to navigate that. And I think everything can come from that, that idea. So the conflict in that space, we have to think that any of the conflict is through people, rightfully so, saying this is our whare and I should be able to be myself in my whare, not have to compromise myself, not have to be anyone different, not have to change because this is my whare. And sometimes Pākehā don't always understand this idea and they bring their own tikanga from their whare into other people's whare.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so...
Well, whakairo rangatira katoa, that's beautiful, my bro.
Kia ora.
And I think it's really important that we get this type of, you know, from your experience, because you've been... you know, engrossed in te ao Māori for quite some time now, and just like many other of our tūpuna who came into te ao Māori and thrived, I think it's the same whakairo, and it's the same way that I approach when I'm walking into a different world from te ao Māori is, you know, be humble about your privilege. Definitely. Yeah, so tēnei e miha tu ana ki a koe I ngā whakairo rangatira nei. And it's really important that we talk about this because, you know, the wānanga that you carry out here in Te Upoko o Te Ika, the spread of the ethnic backgrounds is quite wide, isn't it?
It is. It's really diverse, So it's something that I'm overly focused on, I think. Like I'm really, really aware of how diverse Poneke is as a region. And when you have an open door policy, all that diversity comes through.
Yeah.
And so, and it's beautiful. And so, again, returning back to this idea of when I was at Whitireia and Takirirangi kept the door open for me, what he did in that moment, I kind of joke about, is that he gave me a gift, but he also gave me a burden to carry, and it's to deal with everybody and all the things that they bring with them, because he was so supportive of me that I need to be supportive of others. So I really understand why people would say this is a Māori-only kaupapa. Māori being Māori in their own whare, that makes complete sense to me. And maybe for me, the way I can contribute is being that person that can offer it to those other people in those other moments.
Yeah, awesome. In terms of te ao pūoro and te ara pūoro that we both love and are walking, what's the dynamic of the tikanga pūrākau kōrero versus physical shaping, making wood chips, gluing things together? How do these two things go in your practice and how you teach and this type of kaupapa?
My first thoughts are that I think they definitely work hand in hand, but for me in my own personal experiences, when those pūrākau shine their brightest is when the taonga have come into te ao marama and they play and they have their reo. And so when I'm making, acknowledge all the tikanga and go through those motions, but at times I can be quite focused on the making side of it practically. And then once the practical side is done, and being focused on the practicality, it actually keeps you quite clear-headed and safe from mistakes and accidents. And then when the taonga has come into te ao Māori, that's when I kind of relax and my mind state shifts and I can go to that space of pūrākau and returning to the taiao and taking these taonga back to the taiao and stuff.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to think about in my personal practice, because on one hand you have the side of the journey which is pūrākau, karakia, tikanga, atsuatanga, all these different cultural philosophies and aspects which require and which really need a real emotional and emotional connection to what you're doing. On the other side of the thing, we've got bloody spindle routers and spindle molders and table saws, angle grinders, and if you're not focused, they're very, very dangerous. And so navigating these two spaces where one of these, if I'm using an angle grinder on the outside of a pūtorino, if I'm sitting there and in my head I'm going over the story of hine rau katauri and stuff like that, I'm not focused on what I'm doing.
Exactly, yeah.
It's an important thing for us to think about, is in which part of the process of creating Taonga Puoro do these specific things apply. It's almost like an order of precedence on when I create pūtorino, for example. First thing I do is reflect on the pūtorino and the pūrākau. And then after that, waiho te rā ki te taha, and then start on the selection of the rākau, and splitting and shaping and all that kind of stuff, and then go back.
And it'd be the equivalent of, somebody telling the story of hine rau katauri or maybe, the waiata around pūoro or karakia, and then asking them while they're in the middle of their karakia to think about their chisel sharpening practices, like it's a bit different. So we kind of, it can be easier just to keep your head in that space and that time.
I think that's important for us to think about.
Some of the makers, it's quite an interesting experience when you get them in their really natural space. So at the wānanga, we're on our best behaviour and, everything smiles and everyone's supportive and stuff. But then when you go to the whare, like you come to my whare or go to your whare or spend time with other makers, it's almost like at times I'm almost like taken back how unromantic it is, And I think some people have this idea that it's just really, beautiful and romantic and every moment is a sunrise or a sunset.
Yeah, and the zen moment.
Yeah, it's really zen, and it's like, making is quite practical.
Yeah. You don't have NWA bumping in the background.
All those things.
Yeah. No, rawe. What are the barriers and the difficult things for, kia whakawhanake ai tēnei kaupapa nui ki te hapuri? And on the flip side of that coin, because Te Ao Māori is all about balance, what are the challenges, but also what are the things that you see that you're really enthusiastic about?
I'll start with the challenges and I'll finish on a good buzz. Yeah. The challenges, they're essentially, our challenges are kind of embedded and deeply rooted in our communities. They're not surface layer challenges. They're not, does somebody, can you get a chisel and a piece of wood? Because anyone can get that from Bunnings. In terms of accessibility, anybody can access a chisel and a piece of wood, even if it's a piece of driftwood and a $20 chisel from Bunnings. I think in terms of the challenges, when I think back of some points in my life when I had quite intense challenges, when the outside world was coming into my little world unannounced and uninvited, and I needed to navigate those things, my mind was very fragmented, and even the simplest things were difficult. And so when you kind of expand on that idea and you think that, making a porotiti is real easy, you just, carve a basic shape in 2 holes, or a pūoro is just, this basic cylinder. What we really need to be realistic about is some people are navigating that simple idea with a lot of struggles. And so all those struggles that we know of today that are real, with housing, with just basic cost of living, that's directly affecting everything. It affects everything from somebody enrolling in a reo course to picking up a chisel to having the space and time to go into their whakapapa. Like these are real things that that aren't always seen on an everyday level but are felt very wide and far. So for me in my journey, things became easier for me. We bought a house quite a few years ago before things went stupid. Things became easier for our family when we had stability. And I was able to take a moment, to take a breath, to look around, to readjust, and to see what I could do with that stability. So our biggest challenges, I think, in this space is acknowledging how deeply people are affected with the fundamentals of living, with housing and food and bills. And I think it's really unrealistic and quite sad at times if anybody thinks it's okay to take the position that just because they can do it, everybody can do it, and just try and simplify it like that. And I think we need to be a lot more supportive and understanding of people's journeys and look at things as in some way, you know, talk to people as in their own journeys and see what we can do with that, and to be reassuring. And sometimes it just starts by letting them know that they have the ability to do it, they can do it, and they are amazing, they are special, and that you're there to support them. And sometimes that just clears a bit of the busyness. And then if it's you know, just little moments here and there, little conversations, little you know, phone calls or just meeting up and stuff. It's all those little moments that make up the big moments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the combination of the small impacts that make the big change.
Definitely, yeah.
So the things that, you know, we don't really think about these days, but that's reality at the moment. Well, let's turn it to the good side of things. Let's finish off on a high vibe.
Bro, definitely.
So, aroa tukinga mea harikoa. What are some of the high points in these wānanga that you've seen over the last few years?
Oh, bro, there are so many, man. Like, yeah. One of them that's really special for me is the bro Chris Huriwai. When he turned up.
Rev TikTok fellow.
Yeah, the bro. That's a whole wānanga in itself, man. But like, so he had an experience where he doubted his abilities in carving. And he'd kind of given up on it, and he saw that the wānanga came up, and he's like, I'll give it a go, even though he really doubted his abilities. And he came along, and at the start we really simplify it. About 99% of the people that have been through the wānanga have never touched a chisel or carved before, and it's something that I really focus on, is simplifying stuff. And so in that wānanga he had this experience where he realised that he was able to do it, and he knew that he was capable and he had the potential. And he came back again to another wānanga and realising what he was able to do and to grow it further. And then he's taken it back to Te Tairawhiti, and he's run wānanga back home.
Awesome. Which
is really what it's all about.
Yeah,
it's to expand it and to keep the kaupapa going.
Oh, awesome, my bro. Awesome. Well, me ka te tāwe I konei. Let's finish up here. Well, thank you. No, tēnei he whakamana watu nei ki a koe kei taku ringa whao, kei taku tangata tiriti, ko hara mai nei ki te tautoko I tēnei kaupapa nui whakaharahara. No reira I mihi atu ana, ka whakakapi ka tika ki te karakia, pera ki te Māori. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui a tāne kia wāte kia māma te ngākau te hinengaro, te wairua, te tinana I te ara takatū. Te rongo whakairi ake ki runga kia wāte haira, kua wāte hou. A tūturu kia rongo kia whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e hui e.
Tāiki.
Mauri ora.
Ko te piko